Oh, we got our guest here, Mr. Crombie. Hello, welcome to the show.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
We
Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Yeah, we've
My
met
pleasure.
before. This is my friend TK. You guys haven't met?
ATK,
Hey, hey, hey. Thanks
how's
for
it
being
going?
on time. We usually start the show, we just kind of banter back and forth, where today Daryl was talking more than me,
For a
and
change, yeah.
that's not abnormal. That
Not
happens,
happening.
you know. But we were just talking about some market stuff and what's going on there with Green Park and Oakville, and so it's nice to have you on the show. A little bit of balance to Daryl and I's insanity here.
That's right.
Pleased to be here. And the market is certainly in turmoil, so it's interesting times.
It
If you
is.
can just give a quick intro. So there's going to be people who don't know who you are. There's going to be some people who are watching on YouTube, and then there's going to be some people listening on the podcast audio only. So if you could just give us a quick intro on who you are.
Sure. I'm Brian Crombie. I host a nightly show on 960 AM called the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. And it's streamed online at saga960am.ca. I've had the privilege of interviewing Daryl and numerous other developers in the Greater Toronto Area, as well as across the country and in the United States on development issues, on business issues, life science products, lots of politics, and some lifestyle stuff on Fridays typically. And so I get to chat with a whole bunch of different people. That's my nighttime gig. My day job is I'm executive with a sizable real estate development company in Toronto.
Nice. AM 960, you said.
960 AM, Saga
960 AM.
960 AM.
Does Frank Leo advertise on 960 AM?
I believe he does.
All right, good. Just
Is
checking.
there anywhere Frank doesn't advertise? Is really the
Just checking.
question. Okay.
No worries. Yeah. So what's going on with you right now as far as the company that you're working for? What sort of market I guess influences are you seeing right now?
Well, the condo market is in an ice age right now. It's close to dead. Pre-construction condos are at last year and this year the highest deliveries really in history. And I think there's a real problem with assignment sales not being taken up, with people not closing, with developers that are left with inventory left to sell, and so therefore they're going for inventory loans, and condo prices are down. And I think it's a real issue. Because of that, a lot of condo developers are thinking about converting their development proposals into purpose-built rentals. I think purpose-built rentals are different, and so therefore they got to decide whether they go ahead with what they previously had designed and considered, or do they change it and go through a new process and hiring architects and designers and market research people, and whether they can do that through an adjustment process or whether they got to go back through the whole planning approval process all over again. But I think because of that, we've got a real stall in development. I think this year could be the lowest year of building permits being issued. And even if building permits are issued, the question is, are people going to start construction? I think that people that are finishing up buildings, and you see some of the towers still around the city, are going to finish the towers because they got to, because the last thing you want is a tower half done or three-quarters of the way done. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of people starting new construction. And so I think that excavators and formers and people that are at the front end of a development are going to be looking for work. And I really worry that there's going to be layoffs in the industry. I really worry that there's going to be bankruptcies. I worry that there's going to be distressed sales. And I think that what this does is creates a bust and boom cycle. We've had the boom in the past, and we're now in the bust. And the negative of that is we're in a bust, and it's going to have some problems. The problem with that is that it's going to be an opportunity in the future, but it's also, a volatile situation where we go from this bust to a boom in 3 or 4 years, and that's not the way to run an economy or a business. And I think we've got to have government that comes to the table to solve some of the problems. And Daryl and I talked about it when he was on my show. I think that things like development fees are a mistake. HST has been taken off purpose-built rental. It should be taken off everything. I think time to get approvals should be reduced. I think these MTSA, major transit station area designations should be implemented right away. I think that the whole areas in an MTSA should be zoned mixed use. And I think that you should get dramatic increases in density, because the only way that our city is going to work is if we expand the housing, and it's got to be affordable. And so we got to reduce construction costs. And the only way to reduce construction costs, because costs are what they are, labor is what it is by taking some of these taxes that are incredible. There's 1,000% increase in development fees over the course of the last 15 years in Toronto. 1,000%. There's a town north of Toronto that hasn't got the memo and increased development fees by over 30% this year, which is crazy. A 30% increase when you've got no development taking place doesn't earn you any money.
No.
Vaughan, Mississauga have reduced development fees, but they frankly should go to zero. And if it's not zero, it should be really, really low. And I don't know why Toronto hasn't followed suit. So I think that government is facing what could be a devastating situation in the housing development business. I think that that's bad long term for the economy. That's devastating for a whole bunch of people. And I think that if they don't take action soon, it's going to be a real problem.
Well,
The other
so
night before you joined, we are talking about Green Park. Want to just finish up that conversation, Joe?
yeah, I'd love to hear Brian's take. I don't know if you noticed what happened in Oakville with Green Park over the weekend. They drastically reduced their standing inventory. I don't know if you know about that.
No, I don't.
So Green Park went from $1,100 a foot, where they sold most of the building, and then for the last 23 units, they just put them out at $675 a foot. So we were just talking about the ramifications on the rest of the deals in the area and the rest of the market when something like that, when somebody, I guess, gets ahead of the falling market in such a drastic way. What's the fallout going to be from that? What?
I think that you gotta take a loss. If you're going to incur a loss, it's better to take a loss early. There's a line that is often used about your first loss is your best loss. So I think if you're going to lose, take the loss, get the cash, and then move on so you can develop other things and get the cash. And that's the same reason why you see sales of summer goods, summer products all over the marketplace today, because you got to get rid of the summer stuff so you can bring the fall stuff in retailers. And I think it's the same in every other sector. If you know you're going to have a loss, admit it, take your lumps, get some cash, even if you're selling at a loss, particularly if it's a loss to what you want, but still not a loss to your actual cost. But even if it's a loss to your cost, take it and move on. And I think that what ends up happening often when you've got a boom bust cycle is that people that wait and don't take the early losses end up taking bigger losses longer term. And or what you got to do is, which lots of people are doing, you've seen in the marketplace, is they're offering concessions like crazy. And the amount of concessions you got to offer end up being bigger and longer, whether it be in rental free rent periods, or in condos, free lockers, low interest rate mortgages, et cetera, et cetera. You end up offering more and more and more, and it's cascading. So your first loss is your best loss.
I'll tell a little story that I got from today. So I'm a real estate agent. I work with Franklin and Associates. That's why I was plugging them there at the beginning. And so we do a lot of resale, freehold stuff. And so this lady came to me 2 years ago, and when I first met her, the very first appointment, her dog had died that day. So I got there and she's not in a good place. So she said, "Hey, meet me, come back next week," or something like that. So I figured, okay, no problem. I send her some flowers. I said, "Sorry to hear about your dog." She called me a few weeks later. I went to go see her. She says, "Hey, I'm having some issues financially. This is my situation. What do I do?" I said, "You need to sell. Hurry up." She said, "My daughter, she goes to school. I want her to be in the same home. She's born and raised in this home. Let's stay here." Over the course of the next 2 years, it's, "Oh my gosh, this is stressful. Oh my gosh, it's painful. Oh my gosh, da da da." So finally, this year she calls. She says, "Okay, I got a letter from the bank. They said they're going to take the house. Now come and list the property." She owes more money than the house is worth. We try our best. We do everything we can. We pull all the tricks, but she owes more money than what the house is worth. The offers we got were 100 grand below even what the total debt was. And the second mortgagee that was taking her power sale wasn't willing to budge, because they figure they could get more money later on and protect themselves, pay the first mortgagee and figure it all out later. So today we got a message from the second mortgagee that they took possession of the house and to come remove our sign and lockbox and take it off the market, because they now have possession of the house. And that's, on the residential side, homeowner side, but ultimately the same thing, right? You try to save face, or you try to, make that profit or whatever it is, please your investors, but you hang on to the sinking ship and eventually you lose everything, And developers, there are some already in that position, but there will be more, unfortunately. And there's going to be some like bigger players that we would deem to be, recession proof or whatever it is. But, maybe they've taken on a lot of debt. Maybe they got a lot of overhead. Maybe families are, splitting up, or they got different opinions or something, right? So it's interesting times, to say the least.
I think it is, and I think what you're seeing is, inventory increasing, time on the market increasing, sales down a little bit. And all that says to me is that people haven't reduced their asking prices enough. Because what you got to do is you got to reduce your asking price so you get the thing sold. And the people that are holding their asking price are going to be on the market longer and not get sold, and then they're going to, I worry, take a bigger loss longer term. And in the interim, they're going to incur all those carrying costs, interest, taxes, utilities, etc. So it just, if you're going to have a loss, take the loss.
So I mean, you're clearly a real estate veteran. You've seen cycles in your tenure. I think it's easier to say that once it's happened in the past than if it's never happened before. And then certainly, as a homeowner, it's not a business decision. It's not like, okay, just like cut bait now and go. It's like they get stressed out, they freeze up. It can be a real mess. But especially as a developer, there's a lot of guys out there that maybe never took a loss and got pretty big in the last run up and are sitting, that they were very good at raising money, and maybe they raised a little too much money and they have a few too many deals sitting around right now. And I fear for some people out there right now that are, I think, in that situation, because like you said, I think Ice Age is probably even a little bit soft right now. It's dead. It's absolutely like a ghost town, right? So how long is this gonna last for? And how long can some people kind of hang on, or can people take those losses?
I don't know. I think that as in any kind of boom bust in any kind of market, you just never know. But the bust often happens quickly, but the growth out of the bust takes a long time. And if you take a look at the graphs for what happened in 1990, it took a long time for things to come back. You take a look in the United States after 2008, 2009, it took a long time for things to come back. So I think you go down quickly, but then you come out slowly, such that I think the people that are hanging on are making a mistake. And so therefore, realizing the reality of the situation and moving on is the right strategy. We've talked about that already. I think that to a certain extent, it depends on how banks respond, right? And so if banks are going to be doing foreclosing, if they're going to be not lending money, if they're going to be really resistant to lending more money, then the crash happens quicker, the bottom occurs faster, and then you've actually got more of a chance of coming out quicker. If banks are more cooperative and they're still lending money and they're still extending loans and they're being helpful to people, then it doesn't happen as quickly. And we've got a different system, particularly in single family homes in Canada than the United States, such that frankly people are worse off, but the banks are better off and the market's better off. And let me explain that if I could. So in the United States, we all sort of looked at those graphs in 2008 with the subprime crisis, and it happened really quickly. And the reason why is because in the United States, other than I think in 3 or 4 states, they have what's called non-recourse financing for home ownership. And so therefore, if someone's underwater, they just give the keys back to the bank and walk away, and they're out. And you know what? So I may have lost my equity, but I'm not losing more. In Canada, all of our home ownership is recourse financing. And so therefore, even if you give your keys back to the bank can come after you against your income, against some other assets you own forever until you're completely paid out. So people don't end up giving the keys back. They end up paying the mortgages, and whatever the restructuring is that's got to happen doesn't happen as quickly as it should. And that's great for banks, but it's bad for the market because you don't go through the restructuring as quickly as you can, and it's terrible for people because they can't walk away. And so I think that we've got a good system to leads to a more stabilized, secure banking environment, but it's effectively taking that risk that banks have and put it on to the homeowners, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
So
and we were bragging about that.
In answer to your question about how long it lasts, I think it's 2008, 2009.
In the States.
No,
You
not
that
think?
Canada. Sorry, 2028, 2029. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
So two or 3 years.
Yeah. Well, it
oh,
definitely is
And,
not fixing itself this year.
the statistics that you see are that you've got very high deliveries of condominiums last year, this year, and it starts to go down in 26 and then down a lot in 27 or 28. And so the question is, if you've got this, a whole bunch of extra supply that you've got to absorb, how long is it going to take to absorb? And some of that extra supply is of smaller condominiums that a lot of people may not want. And so you got to make sure that the stuff people want is rented and absorbed or bought and absorbed. And then the stuff that is less attractive hopefully reduces prices enough such that people really want to buy it or rent it, and it gets absorbed. And that's what's going to give the opportunity for new development to take place. That said, I do think that if government does some of the things that we talked about, which is effectively reduce the cost of development by way of reducing, if not eliminating, development fees, reducing, if not eliminating, GST, HST, reducing, if not, frankly, almost eliminating all the red tape, increasing the density in major transit station areas. That's going to help. And given that every developer still needs bank financing, not everyone's going to get financed, but the good developers will get financed, and you'll have life in the marketplace. And the alternative is we got a risk of what's going to end up happening is nothing gets built. People get laid off. They're going to find other jobs. They're going to move to Calgary or Edmonton and start building there, or they're going to start become infrastructure contractors on highways and hospitals and things like that. And when the boom does come back, we're not going to have anyone to build.
that's the
So
most
this is
likely.
a real restructuring that is, I think, the fault primarily of municipal governments that um, restricted and put on taxes that have made things uneconomic, and they got to adjust.
Just to be on the other side of the conversation, because you guys are more on the development side than most, do we have a supply issue? Like, we talked about having not enough homes. We all like agreed that prices were going up because we didn't have enough homes. Well, right now we got more than enough properties for sale, 35,000 of them to be exact. It's just in the GTA area alone. And immigration levels are starting to slow down, and that foreign students are going to be coming less and less. Rents are starting to come down. Do we need more housing? Like, is that something that is even going to be an issue?
So immigration hasn't slowed down nearly to the extent that people have been thinking it would, and that the federal government has been talking about that they think it should, and it hasn't been coming down as of yet. I think it may in the future. But if you take a look at all the immigration statistics, and lots of people have criticized it of late that while we've talked about immigration coming down, it hasn't come down. And frankly, I don't
There
think
was
it should have.
450,000 less temporary residents here, actually. Those are the numbers that we just read a couple of weeks ago on the show. So 450,000 less people. That's a lot of people.
Less
I'm
than
not
the
sure if there's.
crazy peak of ridiculousness, which is
The
still
Yeah.
the
more than
PR numbers, I agree, they haven't come down. They're restructuring with whether they're like refugees and skilled workers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty minimal. But the temporary resident side is something that's been hit hard, which is obviously a rental market.
Yeah, is it the rental market, or is it people that aren't going to be certainly not going to be buying? So you're right, the rental market, but are they rental market, in the Greater Toronto area, or is it people that are working on farms and not in the Greater Toronto area? So I'm not sure, and all the statistics I have seen suggest that immigration, temporary foreign workers, student visas, etc. Have not come down to the extent that you think they should be coming down, and people have been talking about coming down. I was in the U.S. last week at a conference, and they talked about how immigration in the United States was 1 million a year and had gone up to 2 million a year. For a population twice our size, we had 1 million people last year.
Hmm.
So on a per capita basis, ours was like 5 times what the United States was. So our immigration has been huge. I think that Toronto, the Greater Toronto area, is still going to grow. Immigrants are still going to come here. People are still going to want to have jobs here. CMHC said we had 3.5 million homes short in Southern Ontario, 1.5 in the Greater Toronto area, and that's to get back to reasonable levels of affordability. So, do we need more supply? Yes, we need more supply. Problem we've got is the supply that we've got in the last couple of years is primarily studios and one bedrooms, condos, and the supply that we don't have is single family homes, and 2 and 3 bedroom homes. So we've oversupplied small apartments, condos for single people and the investor community, and we've undersupplied homes for families, whether they be single family homes or condos that or apartments that are good for families with 2 or 3 bedrooms. And the statistics that you've probably seen are we are creating as many single family homes today as we were in the 1970s. 50,000 homes a year. Like it's crazy that we can't do a better job.
So one of my ideas, and again, I'm not like anti-development or anything like that, but I think that right now there's a underutilization of the low-rise homes. So we got a lot of people who are older who are living in a 4-bedroom house where they only got 1 or 2 people living in the house, and that eventually that's going to turn over. The purpose-built rental boom, which I assume this is what we're in right now, it seems like that's what's going to happen over the next few years, will be able to satisfy a lot of what people were handling on their own. So maybe an individual investor buying a condo and then renting it out, or someone buying a secondary home or renting out their family home to, a handful of people. A lot of those people are going to be selling those properties, right? You got tenancy laws that are in the way and, investment horizons and stuff like that. They're figuring it's a good time to be able to get out. Also, there was a lot of people who were buying second homes. Like my whole career, it was people who were buying a second, third, fourth home to be able to rent out because that was the way to get rich. And I think that will slow down as well too. So in my opinion, just based on like what I've seen in the past, is that the supply issue is not as is overstated, and that we need more of the right housing, which I agree with you for sure. We need bigger units. We need to have strategically placed housing in certain areas. We don't need any more small 200, 300, 400 square foot units. We got enough of those to come out. We do need more detached houses, but like where do you build them? Where would we build houses right now? What do you think would be a solution to get more low-rise houses in the GTA?
Well, I think that there's, some people have called it the gray belt. I think that there's a fair amount of industrial employment land in around the old, the metropolitan Toronto or the 905 suburbs that could be exploited for that kind of development. And maybe it's not, a third of an acre or a quarter of an acre homes. Maybe it's townhomes or detached homes or semis and things like that. But I think that makes sense. There's been a lot of controversy about Highway 413. I happen to believe that if we want Toronto to be the city center that it could and should be, whether it's 413 or something like that, we're going to have to provide access to single family homes in the suburbs of 905 around Toronto. There was this place to go legislation from, I don't know, 10 years ago that talked about Caledon going from 50,000 to 500,000 people. I think that might make sense. And if you've got Caledon growing from 50,000 to 500,000 people, they've either got to have the Bolton GO train line, which has been talked about for like 20 years, which is taking the existing railway line that goes up through, I think it's by Woodbine up to Bolton. Actually, I think it goes through Vaughan up to Bolton. Or you got to have Highway 413 and open up some of that land and make it available for housing. And I think that the efficiency of agricultural land has dramatically improved, and so therefore people that are talking about we can't give up 1 acre of agricultural land, I think are being overly extreme. And what we do is if you create a moat around Toronto. Think about it. If you create a moat around Toronto such that you can't develop anything outside of where current development is, you're robbing from young people, newcomers, renters, the dream of single family home ownership. And I think that's wrong. And we can't be in a world where we're building 50,000 homes in 1975 and 50,000 homes in 2025, single family homes. And so we've got to open up some more land. I think Lakeview, 120 acres of land that is an old power generating station, beautiful place sticking out into the Lake Ontario. Nothing's happening there. Why is nothing happening there? It's because there's a huge amount of infrastructure cost, because there's some environmental stuff that's got to get cleaned up, because there's not appropriate transportation or transit. We should make that available. And you've got land that could be developed. And it may not be single family homes. It may be townhouses and duplexes and condos, but we got that. Downsview should be developed. Woodbine Center should be developed. We've got employment land in and around Toronto that should be developed. So I think that people that think that, everyone's got to live in a condo and no one, or an apartment, and no one can live in a single family home are wrong. Now, your comment about people, older people in homes, then they're not selling. We do have an issue. I don't know how you solve it politically, but the property taxes in Toronto are half on a mill rate basis of what property taxes are in the 905. And that's because politically it's been impossible for politicians in the city of Toronto to increase property taxes. But when you've got property taxes that are really relatively cheaper in Toronto versus elsewhere, and you've got land transfer taxes or double land transfer taxes, and some of the other issues, you take away a huge incentive for people that have got this, buildup of home equity in a home that is now too big for them in old Toronto, wanting to sell and move elsewhere. So if we got rid of land transfer
That's a good
taxes,
one.
if we
Yeah.
if we increased the property taxes, even though politically that's going to be very difficult to do, but
You're not running for
made the
councillor
property
anytime
taxes.
soon, right, Brian?
I'm not, but
Okay.
the property taxes in Toronto are too low relative to the
I agree.
905.
Agree. I live in Toronto. I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
There should be
That's
some equalization of that, because what we want to do is do what you've suggested, which is have some of the empty nesters move out of their homes. And the challenge is what you've got schools that are not having as many people in them.
they're
And you're
empty.
going to have closures of schools. You're going to have libraries that aren't going to have the demand. So you got infrastructure that you paid for that's not being economically justified, because instead of 4 and 5 people living in a home, you've got 1 or 2 people living in a home. And so you've got to allow that transition to take place. Now, I do think that in a lot of cases in Toronto, you've got people, developers buying homes and rebuilding them as bigger homes, but not necessarily homes that have got a lot more people in them. And if you take a look at the statistics, the density per acre in the city of Toronto, other than in areas along transit lines where you've got condominiums and apartments, has gone down. And we got to change that. And so I think that there's a sixplex legislation that was passed for the city of Toronto makes a ton of sense. And I think it's a travesty that all the former boroughs, the former cities in the city of Toronto, outside of the old city of Toronto, that didn't have that apply to them. It's a mistake, because it's not going to happen everywhere, but it's going to happen in a couple of places. And given the incentive for developers to come in and buy an old bungalow and turn it into a semi, or turn it into a larger home, or turn it into, in some cases, a 3-plex, a 4-plex, or a 6-plex, makes sense. Think about Roncesvalles. You think about the beaches. You think about so many parts of Toronto. There were rooming houses in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And for some reason, rooming houses have got this unbelievably negative perception. But rooming houses today are 6-plexes or 4-plexes, and they're not negative. What they do is they make really nice middle, the missing middle available for people in homes that they want to live in. Study after study says that people really like living in communities like Port Credit, like Blue West Village, like Roncesvalles, like the beaches, which are 20 to 40 units per acre. But what we're building today is either towers that are 80 to 120 units per acre, or single family homes that are 1 to 4 units per acre. So we're building, suburbs and suburban sprawl, or towers. And we're not allowing people to build the 20 to 40 units per acre that are the pre-war and post-war homes in Port Credit and Swansea and Blue West Village and the beaches. And, I could go on, that people like. If you take a look at the density in Bedford Park, it's 2 and 3 times what it would be in a lot of the balance of Toronto. And that's okay and should be allowed.
Yeah. Try to get a consent for severance in one of those areas,
They
It's not
definitely
gonna
don't
happen.
make it easy. So now we hear this week, I guess it was this week, they have a brilliant new plan, right? What do they call it? Build Canada Homes, $16 billion fund that goes towards building affordable units. Did we just get an echo? That was weird. What do you think about this whole plan?
And a
for
bylaw run
yeah, and run by a ward
politician.
counselor. Yeah.
Does the government have a role to play in building homes? Yes, I think it does. I'm not sure it's going to be the solution. I'm not sure it's going to be as big as they're talking about. And is there a big benefit for prefab development? Yes, I was at a presentation just the other day about an apartment builder that's not doing prefab, but is doing development that is damn close to prefab. And so, are there better construction techniques that can be used? And things that are more like Lego blocks that you can put together and build homes more efficiently and cheaper? There's no question. There is. We are building homes today like the way we did built 50 years ago. And so, is there some productivity and technological improvements that we can put in place? Yes. That said, I think the big opportunity is private-public partnerships. It's government either giving or renting land. And so, Downsview Park is as I mentioned, one example. Lakeview, which was at one point in time owned by the province. I think that governments can make land available to developers in a partnership where they take out their money longer term as part of the equity, and we can get homes built a lot quicker. You think about development fees, you think about HST, you'd think about all the other fees that governments charge. They are taking the money, and I think people have talked about the actual taxes on home building being about 31%. They're taking that up front.
Yeah.
While you're the developer, you get your money, after the government gets paid, after the contractors get paid, after everyone else gets paid, the bank gets paid, and then maybe 5, 10 years from now, you'll make your 15 to 20% that you want to get. So government should be taking their money, if any, out longer term. So does government have a role to play? Yes. Has government backed off their involvement in housing since, 1995, 1996, particularly in social housing? Yes. So is there something government should be doing? No question. I'm not sure what they're currently talking about is the right way. Probably in a small way, yes, but I think there's other really smart and important ways. I think development fees are the biggest. If the federal and provincial governments started giving cities some of the money they're going to lose from development fees in exchange for them reducing development fees to zero, I think that would do more than almost anything else. If you had the HST reduced to zero immediately for both condos as well as purpose-built rentals, and no matter whether it's a first-time buyer or any buyer, I think you would see more development right away. If you said every regulation got thrown out after 10 years if it wasn't renewed, so that you got rid of the red tape instead of always adding on to the red tape, I think you get development going. If you took the major transit station areas and you said, we're going to give you the right to develop as of right something, I don't know whether it's 20 stories or 40 stories or what it is density, but the problem is, I use this example a lot in the past, but there's a street in Mississauga where almost every house put on a backyard deck, but every house needed to go to the committee of adjustment to put on that backyard deck. If you know that every house wants a backyard deck and you're going to approve it, make it as of right.
Yeah.
Don't make everyone go through the whole planning and approval process. We're adding red tape and regulation like crazy. Get rid of it. And so it makes it easier for developers to get things done as of right. And I'm not saying you approve everything, but figure out what you're going to approve ultimately. When something like over 90% of all of the proposals that go to the Ontario Land Tribunal ultimately get approved, what that says is they're going to get approved. So let's realize things and approve them right away. I think every city in the Greater Toronto Area has got an economic development department that spends time attracting businesses to their communities, and a planning and development department that tries to make it harder for people to bring business. If you change the whole orientation of planning and development and made it more like economic development, because that's what it is, and said, I want to attract homes, I want to build homes, I want to grow my city, I want to make for a better place, and I'm not going to restrict everything, I'm going to try to encourage everything. I think you change your attitude. Have a consumer orientation rather than a regulation and restriction orientation.
I wonder, like TK's mentioned it a bunch of times, that, if they would just stop being so short-sighted with this upfront crazy amount of fees and just realize how many new taxpayers we're creating on that property for them to bring in revenue forever now, right? Once the development's done, it's like, is nobody doing some kind of a report that shows them, like if we drop the DCs and we spur on activity, later we're going to have all this money coming in all of the time from all these extra units that we actually allowed to get on the market.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I've sat down with counselors. I've sat down with planning development people, and I've said this development is going to bring you net present value of $X 100 million of property taxes. This is what any business person would think about when thinking about a development. And they say, well, that's not our business. We want the fee up front. We want the development fee. So you don't have counselors. You don't have council chambers. You don't have planning people thinking like a business person. And it's crazy because they could make a lot more money longer term. They could be a better city longer term if they took more of a economic orientation to decision making. But
This is
they
how
don't.
it is. They don't.
It's like the business side for it seems like the whole Canada, like, because it's not just Toronto that has these problems. Like, we really have these problems coast to coast, and a lot of this municipal sort of, red tape type of talk. But it's also like when we look at businesses to be here in Canada, as far as corporate taxes. It's just like, what's the incentive right now for a company to open up in Canada? What's the incentive for a Canadian company to stay in Canada?
Did you see that?
Crown
Did you see
Royal
that
was like
chart? Did you see that chart
the
that was
business
put out on social
investment,
media?
business
Yeah.
investment in machinery. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dropped off the maps, right?
No, the investment in Canada, the business
Yeah.
investment in Canada.
But compared to the U.S., yeah, the U.S. is
Oh.
growing. They keep buying machinery, and we're not buying machinery anymore because we got no jobs, we got no manufacturing, we got no businesses who want to open up shop here.
There's no
We've
reason.
been relying on real estate and construction for so long, and so it's again this the foresight of saying, hey, if we give them a tax break, at least we'll collect some of the taxes. Instead they say, go
I
ahead.
think our growth and prosperity and productivity in Canada in the last 10, 15 years has been dismal. And, 10, 12 years ago, our productivity was equal to the United States. Today, it's supposedly 40% of the United States. I think we've got to have a government, and I think that the current government, maybe kicking and screaming, but the current government is changing some of its attitudes in regards to having a growth agenda and a prosperity agenda. And I think we need to do that. I think this major projects office initiative that they've announced is a great start in that regard. And I think that getting projects approved through the approval process, whether they be pipelines or natural gas liquefaction plants or nuclear or small nuclear reactor plants or whatever it is, makes a ton of sense. But we got to do more of that. I highly recommend to you a book called Abundance. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's an excellent book. And what it says is that we've, in the Western world, particularly progressive, center and center left communities, cities, provinces, states, countries, etc., have done a really good job of regulation and restriction, but a terrible job of actually building. And yes, we want to make sure we build the things that we want and that we approve the things that we want, but we want some things. And so just putting in place the red tape and regulation is the wrong strategy. We've got to also build, and we've got to grow the pie. We've got to grow the economy. Otherwise, there's not going to be enough to redistribute out. And so I think that too often we've thought about how to redistribute and not enough about how we grow. And I think that R&D, business investment, productivity, prosperity have got to be more of the agenda for government. And I think that business has got to take some of the responsibility. I think business investment in R&D and business investment in materials in Canada is substantially lower than it is in the United States. And so is that because businesses not willing to take the risk, or because government incentivizes us incorrectly? It's some combination. And so I think that we need a collective desire to grow our competitiveness. And we need to.
Are you a real estate agent and you're looking to make a change anywhere in Ontario? Guess what? We're hiring. Franklin Associates, #1 team in the GTA for all REMAX teams, #1 team for all teams from all companies for number of units sold throughout Toronto. So if you're looking to make a change, best decision I ever made was to join Franklin Associates. Go to jointeamleo.com and we can set up a call. Yeah, they show a lot of information about like residential real estate and housing investment, right? So it's like how much dollars is a Canadian spending towards their housing over the course of their lifetime versus in the US. And there's just such a disparity that no wonder they've got extra money in order to be able to invest in their business. They've got more extra money to be able to invest in their toys. I mean, they can go and buy more things, which means that's going to spur more economic activity because they got an ATV or 3 cars or whatever it is, And now we're talking about removing the tariffs on the Chinese electric vehicles. And it's just like our policies always just seem to be, I'm not for or against it. I probably would want to buy one. They look really cool, but it's just like our policies are always against homegrown Canadian businesses. It just seems like everything that we do does not lead to a Canadian company, A, being successful here, or B, an international company wanting to come here to open up shop. Like it's just there's just no policies that make sense unless because to open up to the Canadian market, guess what? You just have to go to the US, send it over here, there's no tariffs, and you're going to sell to all of us anyways. There is no incentive to open up here because as soon as you build here and you want to send it south, you might have a tariff or you may in the future have a tariff. And so what's the incentivization? There's none. And that becomes something that, like Brian was saying, over the last 10 or 15 years is an issue. But imagine how much more that problem is going to be exacerbated over the next 10 or 15 years if this continues. What's left of Canada?
I think at the same time, though, we've got a bunch of benefits. I think that our universities and the fact that we're going to welcome more foreigners to study in Canada than the United States is on a relative basis because of some of the rules that Donald Trump has put in place in the United States. I think the fact that we've got a healthcare system that other than for the rich is far better in Canada than it is in the United States. I could go through a lot of the things that make Canada a fantastic place. So I think that some of the infrastructure that we put in place. I think the Ontario line is going to be spectacular in providing access to some parts of Toronto that haven't had great transit. You think about whether it's the Portlands, you think about Leslieville, you think about King West. There's going to be far better transit, and it's a shame we didn't build it 10 years ago. But it's this downtown relief line, Ontario line, is going to be great. I think some of the lines that the premier announced in the last election that haven't been built as of yet, but have been talked about, will be great. I think the extension of the subway up on Yonge Street. I think that the Bolton line we've already talked about. I think that this Mid-Toronto line that's been talked about that would take a go from Milton right through Mississauga, right through the center of the city, between Castleloma, between DuPont and Davenport, right by Castleloma, right by the Summerhill LCBO, up by the Science Center, out to Scarborough, maybe even out to the zoo. We'll open up areas for greater densification with a sort of express line across the center of the city that make a ton of sense. So I think we put in place good transit, maybe even some transportation. I don't like the idea of a tunnel underneath the 401, but I do like the idea of 413. I don't want to take up a whole bunch of farmland with it, but I think, having another highway around Toronto, if we think Toronto's going to grow, is, I think, the right strategy. And I think developing, therefore, some of this land that is around it and some of the gray industrial land makes a ton of sense. And with that kind of infrastructure, with the lower capital gains tax rate that's been put in place, hopefully, faster approval of some of the major projects that they're talking about, hopefully less red tape in housing. I think we can solve some of these problems we talked about. And
they've definitely tried.
So I'm optimistic, but we got to take some action.
They've tried more recently with planning. They've definitely released some more planning flexibility. They're trying, but it's like they give you with this hand and then they don't realize they forgot about something that has a major effect. And now what they were trying to accomplish isn't possible for half the people putting in applications. It's like they don't think the whole thing through all the time. And things like rental replacement, like there's all these crazy things out there that if people really realized how much development it stopped, their heads would spin. Just a crazy like gymnastics that developers have to do to just get something going is truly unbelievable. And what's really crazy is that the developers end up being the evil, greedy sons of bitches out there when we're really just trying to make sure everybody else doesn't steal everything out of the deal. Because I mean, I know that we're pointing at DCs and taxes and stuff, but on this run up, labor got crazy, material prices got crazy, like everything got really crazy. And the developers kind of stuck there like, well, I kind of need lumber. So what am I going to do? I got to buy the lumber and I need a framer. And I mean, there's no other framers around, right? And so all of a sudden it's like the prices just get out of hand. And so we kind of almost need this period where people go, shit, like I don't have any work. I better drop my prices now. And finance companies, well, they're actually charging a bloody fortune if they're even willing to lend anything anymore. But there definitely needs to be more than just, I think, the DCs and the HST. Those are amazing and they'll make a big difference. But everything else got really fat and bloated, didn't it?
Well, the line about it taking twice or three times as long to get a development approved as it does to actually build it. Like that's crazy that it takes longer to push the paper than it does to actually construct something. So I think the red tape and regulation is unquestionably an issue. Now, that said, even if you got things approved more quickly today, nothing would happen. And so I think that if you want to, and I think that people will realize everything you just said. The problem I've got is they won't realize it until it's too late. It's going to be 2 years from now when nothing's been built for 2 years. And then, you've got building starts at an all-time low and people start to realize the mistake that we made 2 years prior. So if we want to increase building and we don't want to have 150,000 layoffs in the next 6 months, the government's got to take action now. And the easiest and quickest is development fees and HST, and it should be reduced. Even though I think that in the MTSAs they should increase density, even if you increase density today, if you got those huge development fees, developers aren't going to start building. So I think there are some things that we should be doing longer term, and that is red tape regulation, density, infrastructure, etc. But in the short term, the only thing you can do is DCs, development fees, and HST.
And then at the end of this, whenever the sentiment does change again and people can figure out how to pencil deals, like what are people going to be willing to buy pre-con from people again, knowing that, what just happened is a possibility 6, 7, 8 years down the road when the building's going to be finished.
The price will always determine the market. If it's coming out at the right price, people will line up. Like you said, they're at Green Park. Yeah. They had a lineup of people. We
but think they might have sold them built too. That's a little different, but yeah.
But that's what it is. Before pre-con, when we used to sell pre-con, it was like a discount. It was like it's going for $400 a square foot across the street, and you're getting it for $375. And people were thought, well, I don't get it for 3 or 4 years, so it's not a bad deal, right? And then all of a sudden it's just a little bit more, but it's going to be better. And then it became like 40% more or something like that. And the developers had to charge that much, otherwise, it wasn't getting built. But I mean, as the consumer, the risk that they were taking on, logically, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But if you bought in 2013 to 2015, you made money, you looked good, and you told your friends about it. So they did the same things in 18, 19, 20, 21, and they didn't do so well. So, I mean, as long as the pricing comes back down to the point where the market says that's worth it and that there's value there, I don't think we'll ever have an issue selling properties. Like Brian was saying before about the reason that the activity hasn't up yet is because sellers haven't brought their price down low enough. There's lots of buyers out there right now. There's tons of people willing to buy.
I think the owners or the buyers are going to change, though. I think that the market that you probably sold to between 2015 or 17 and 2022 were investors, not owner occupiers. I think you're going to have to appeal to owner occupiers, and owner occupiers are going to want bigger units. They're going to want some amenities in it that someone that's thinking about flipping before it's even finished is not going to necessarily want. And so I think that you're going to have to think about different marketing. I think that too much of the marketing ended up being for and attracting people that were just investors that thought they were going to flip it before it even got built, or just before they had to come forward with their final purchase payment. And so I think we're going to have a condo market, but I think it's going to be not completely, but primarily an owner occupier market, versus what in the last couple of years was 10-20% owner occupier, and everyone else was an investor.
I think
they weren't scrutinizing the plans, the floor plans, and the amenities and all that, because they're like, well, I'm not going to live here. Who cares?
Yeah. Well,
the product was not as.
I'm not going to close on this is more what most people were thinking. I'm never going to close on this, right? And so I think that is a major flaw in the system is the assignments. When the assignments came in, they really kind of changed the playing field, mixed with the fact that you got to sell 65, 70% before you get your financing. It just opened the floodgates for all kinds of problems. And so now, like, one of those bloated layers in the sale of a condo was some fucker, assigning it and making $50,000, $100,000, depending on the price point that the thing was at. Right. That was an added tax in the middle of the whole thing that ended up being a cost for somebody. Right. On top of all the other crap that everybody has to pay. So,
But now they're not able to sell, and they're probably losing their equity when they try to close because the appraisal's coming in at 20%, 30% less than it was when they initially contracted. And so I think you're going to have those people that made those bets disciplined, regrettably, because I think there's going to be a lot of people, small investors, that are going to lose money, and it's going to be in that couple $100,000. And I have heard too many stories of people that raised the money to make those initial deposits on pre-construction condos, borrowing from home equity line of credits, and so therefore, not only are they going to lose money, but they're going to put at risk their own principal residence.
We're selling their homes right now. They're losing their homes.
Yeah, I think that's a travesty, but it's reality, and so I think that you're going to go through this massive shakeout. But we can't live in a world where, because of the shakeout, we don't build any new housing stock for 2 years.
sure.
We got to keep building, and that's why I come back to what we've talked about: development fees,
the right product. Yeah.
HST.
Yeah, and you need all that because you need to figure out a way to make bigger things for less, right? Like somehow we have to figure out a 600 square foot or 425 square foot. It needs to get bigger to a point where somebody actually wants to live in it, right? And somehow we have to magically make that affordable. So, I mean, do you think that DCs and HST is enough for that? Does that bring us into that range?
So I think that construction costs are coming down, and you would probably know that better than I.
Sure.
But I've heard,
Land
particularly at the
costs.
front. So I think land costs has come down a lot, and so you go back to 1990, and I don't know the numbers specifically, but what I'm told is that housing went down by, call it 25 to 30%. Maybe single family went down 20%, condos went down by 30%, land went down by 80%. And so you start thinking through those numbers. If your construction cost is approximately the same, the construction worker is going to get approximately the same. The developer's still got to make some money, otherwise the bank's not going to give money. So a lot of the costs are approximately the same. If the top line goes down by 20 to 30%, land's got to go down by like 80% to make the whole numbers work. So I think land in the 1990s did go down a lot, and I think land is going down a lot today. I think land has gone down by 50%. It hasn't gone down as much as it could and should. And so that's one thing that's got to happen. That said, I do think that excavation, forming, sort of the early stages of construction are cheaper today than they would. I've been told we're back to 2019 pricing. I don't think it is in finishing yet. And the reason why is because the finishers are still finishing. So they're still busy because there's 100-story, 90-story condos that aren't done yet. And so they're still employing those people. But in a year or 2 years' time, that's going to come down as well. And so I think the developers are tendering and confirming contracts for excavating and forming today, but they're not yet for finishing because they know that the pricing is going to come down in a couple of years. So I think that you're going to have construction costs come down. I think you've had land costs come down. I don't think construction workers are going to be taking in less money. I don't think the developers are going to be demanding less profit because banks won't let them, because they want to know that there's enough incentive for them to finish the building. The banks don't want to take over, and the banks are going to take a little bit less because the government reduces the interest rate, but the banks are going to have still a spread to the cost of funds because otherwise they're not giving the business. So in the end, to make it work, I think government's got to take less, and government's gone from taking 5 to 10% to 31%, and that's a mistake. And they're taking their money up front, where everyone else takes the money over time and developers take it at the end. So honestly, Ronald Reagan said it, government's not the solution, government's the problem. Government is the problem right now, and then we got to change that. And I understand municipal politicians to say we can't reduce it because we don't have enough money from elsewhere to pay for all the infrastructure. And to a certain extent, that's true. But 30% of nothing is nothing. And so I think provincial governments and federal governments have got to help municipalities make up the lost development fees, but they got to demand that those come down. And then I think we've got to think about productivity, prefab, better construction techniques, et cetera. And so that's a whole other conversation. I think that any other industry in the world has done things with technology that the building industry hasn't yet, or hasn't enough. And I think that's got to change. And then come back, I apologize for repeating, but I come back, government's role is infrastructure. And we've talked a lot about more infrastructure, and we've done some, but we haven't done enough. And some of this infrastructure that we could and should do opens up other areas for development that would make a ton of sense. And I've talked about some of them. And you go to sort of the long-term plans that Metrolinx has, and they make a ton of sense. We should get our act together and do it. The Milton Mississauga line has, I think it's 6 trains southbound in the morning, 6 trains outbound in the evening, versus the Lakeshore line and the Markham line that is all day two-way frequent GO train service. The places to go, the big move that Metrolinx did a couple of years ago, maybe it was a decade ago or 5 years ago, said that going all day two-way had an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio. And if you didn't do that, you'd have to double deck the Gardiner Expressway. And everyone knows how busy the Gardiner Expressway is. And you think about all the people that live in Mississauga that could go commute to jobs. But because we only give them 6 trains down in the morning and 6 trains out in the evening, you don't get the kind of development that you could and should have, the kind of density. In the last municipal election, I don't know if you guys know Dixie and Dundas, but it's like a power center and a whole bunch of vacant land. It's the first GO train station out of Toronto into Mississauga. There was a proposal at one point in time to take a subway there, and it was turned down. The subway goes along the railway tracks from Islington to Kipling, and then it stops. But the railway tracks actually go within a block of Sherway Gardens and right to Dixie and Dundas. You could take the subway out to Dixie and Dundas, just like it's gone to the Vaughan Metro Center. You could put all-day two-way frequent GO train service to Dixie with no problems. If you did that, you should have huge amount of development. And you guys have seen the Vaughan Metro Center. What is it? 50, 60-story development? And it's gorgeous. And it justified the building of a gorgeous living arts center and other things at the Vaughan Metro Center. Do you know what the density is at Dixie and Dundas?
2 times.
12 stories.
12 stories.
Who's going to build a subway to an intersection or frequent every half-hour GO train service if you've got 25 stories right at the intersection and 12 stories for the rest of the area?
Isn't that
It should be the Vaughan Metro Center. And if it was the Vaughan Metro Center, it'd be spectacular. It'd be one of the nicest places to live in all of Toronto. So, the provincial government, Metrolinx, should be talking to the city government and saying, you give us density of what the Vaughan Metro Center has, we'll bring you a subway. We'll bring you all-day two-way GO. And, I don't know if you've been to that Vaughan Metro Center, but there's a terminal just south of the 407 that's got GO trains and buses and subways.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
Seems like they got a lot of power up there in Vaughan. They were able to get things built. Brian, we could talk to you for all day, to be honest with you. But we're at the end of the show. And so it's kind of one of those things where we don't want to go on too long. But everything you're saying is resonating big time. I can see why you got your own show. You're a pro. I can see why you're on why you're on the air.
Chatting with the two of you. And I'd love to have you back on my show, or you can invite me back anytime.
So people, again, your show, when is your show airing? And
it's 6:00 every night on 960 AM. You can stream it online at saga960am.ca. I put all my shows as soon as the radio show goes to air. I put them on my YouTube video channel, Brian Crombie YouTube. I put it on podcast servers. I put it on social media, and it's the Brian Crombie Radio Hour.
Awesome. How long have you been doing that show for?
5.5 years. Actually, you know what?
Same as us.
Next month it's 6 years.
The COVID.
5 shows.
We're 5.5 years.
The COVID podcast push, right?
He was pre-COVID. He's 6 years. He's pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID?
Yeah.
I was 2019. I started.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Look at you, ahead of the curve. Well, appreciate the time, sir.
Really appreciate it.
Great talking to you. Thank you so much. TK, always a pleasure.
We'll get you back on the show, Brian.
Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay,
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.